Hello, it's Ashley, your career coach and spokesperson over at SoFi. I've got Brandon Copeland here. I'm so excited. For those of you who don't already know, he's an NFL player. He's on the Patriots. He's a professor. He's an alumni at University of Pennsylvania. He teaches financial literacy. He is a multi-passionate man with all sorts of different things, business and impact, that we want to talk about today. I want to focus our conversation on how to make an impact during COVID and how he is self-reflecting and what you can learn from that. So, Brandon, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people sitting at home are kind of reflecting on how they have many different interests and passions. And I feel like you're the kind of person who has that. Like, do you have any, just to kind of start off, like, how have you navigated that in your career of juggling different interests you have? Because I find, for me, I started in counterterrorism and then became a career coach. So I love pivoting and changing. And I think that's people, but a lot of people feel a lot of fear right now, I think, around making a change.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this could give you that opportunity to really evaluate and pivot for yourself in terms of this pandemic and stuff. But for me, it's partly going with the flow. I think, life is a lot easier. I did internships years ago when I was in college at UBS, Wall Street firm. And I remember, being there and talking with some of the mentors that I was shadowing with and asking them, like, point blank, are you happy? Right. And a lot of them genuinely said no. Right. Like, I remember one guy looking at the pictures of his wife and his kids and say, I have 3 beautiful girls and, I work hard. They have everything I have everything that I could have ever wanted for them. And I'm saving up for everything. But however, like, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I come in here and I just push these buttons and all of that type of stuff. And I remember I was a junior in college going into my senior year. And I was like, yeah, that just can't be me. Right. Yeah. And so I think for some of us, we have to understand that the pivot is also your body naturally kind of telling you, or your mind naturally kind of telling you, hey, I'm ready to do something else. I'm ready to evolve and grow. I need a new challenge, right? Mm-hmm. It'd be like taking the same grade over and over and over again for the rest of your life. Being a freshman in high school for the rest of your life, taking the same courses for the rest of your life. Obviously, different careers, they have evolutions and growth within them. But, I would just strongly suggest to people, like, sometimes you don't fight what your body is telling you or your mind is telling you to do. You do still need to put in research and evaluate every opportunity and evaluate that pivot, right? Like, you don't just, I don't suggest you just walking in one day and just and saying, hey, I'm done, right? Yeah. But certain emotions like that is you have to listen to your own, your big best friend in the world, which is probably your inner voice, right? The person who knows you the best.
They're frenemy too. I mean, sometimes I think a lot of people are probably sitting at home and they're hearing the voices in their head with, more unemployment being filed than ever before. It's like, on one side, it's a very intimidating time for people if they're with negative self-talk, but then it's also a very inspiring time because there's space to think. And I know you're really big on having a reason behind what you're doing, like a why. What is your why? And then also, what tips can we give anybody listening to figure out theirs? Because I think sometimes it's very daunting to kind of think, like, what is my purpose? Like, I don't know,
Yeah. I think so. The reason why I think it gets daunting a lot of times is because we feel like as we grow and evolve, if your why, or society kind of tells us if your why has changed, then you've changed, and oh, you're not the same person. You're not as hungry as you used to be. Well, I shouldn't be, right? Like, I worked hard to be in a different place than I was when I was in high school, right? Mm-hmm. And so first and foremost, understanding and accepting that your motivation and your why, I consider that your North Star, but your motivation is what helps you attack and try to climb up that ladder to get there on a daily basis. All of those can change, right? Yeah. So, I'm gonna come back to your question, but for me, like, my motivation one day to get up and work out early this morning might be music. Another day, it might be looking at a picture of my son and thinking about, what life I want to provide for him. Another day, it might just be thinking about my family in general, but that's the motivation. That's what helps push you on those days when you just don't feel like being pushed, right? Week 2, week 3 of the diet, so to speak, right? When it gets more and more monotonous. But your why, my why personally is freedom. Financial freedom, for me, lends itself to mental freedom. Just being able to make sure that my family and I, we can do whatever we want, whenever we want, and not, outlandish, outrageous things. It's just more of like, I don't want to be stressed if wifey and I want to take a random vacation, right? I don't want to be stressed trying to figure out how, we had, maybe our car stops working. I don't want to have, to go through an overwhelming amount of stress dealing with that situation, for example. But also, and more importantly for me, I consider we have one life to live in this field, right? We have one life to live, and I don't necessarily want to ever feel like I am forced to do something or work for someone who I don't like. I don't see the vision. I don't see the dream. But I have to work for them because that's the only way I can put food on the table, right? So I have to put up with the BS. I don't think my wife would be mad at me for this, but I remember one time, we were dating, just girlfriend and boyfriend at the time, and it was the off season. I'm dropping her off to work. I was visiting her. We didn't even live together at that point in time. And I'm dropping her off to work, and she gets out of the car and she looks so miserable. This is before her current job. So, if her
for employers listening, disclaimer.
Right. But no, this is really, she loves her job now. But I remember her getting out of the car and just looking so miserable and just like, oh, here I go. And I'm just like, that is a terrible feeling for me to allow you to go walk in there and spend 9 hours a day at this place where you literally dread it. Right? For me, I'm chasing that. I'm chasing freedom. And I would just tell everyone, kind of consider what you really want. And so years ago, that freedom would have sounded like I want to be a billionaire, right? It would have came out differently. And as I've grown and understood what I'm really chasing, I'm not necessarily chasing a certain dollar amount. I'm chasing a mindset. I'm chasing a confidence in my own financial situation, but also just my own hustle situation. Right? If I know that ultimately I can provide for myself and my family, then boom, I can go out, take risks I need to take. I can know when to play it safe, but ultimately that for me is what that's my North Star.
Yeah, I'm hearing you talk about a few key points that I think are really interesting. Like, number one, you talked about freedom, which to me is a core value. And as a career expert, I found that most people have about 4 or 5 that are fundamental to their being, like key ingredients to who they are, how they operate. And when one of those core values are being violated, it's like people don't feel happy at work, So if you value freedom and you're stuck somewhere where you can't have that, it's going to be visceral. And so to me, just as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, okay, somebody after this particular conversation can look up core values, like I have a guide for that. People have guides on core values, and figure out what are your top 5, and not ones that you think you are, but ones that you deeply are as a person. So that's really helpful to hear. And then another thing I was hearing you talk about, for anybody who's kind of taking notes like I would on one of these LinkedIn lives, is you talk about evolution and seasons, which is huge. It's like people are allowed to change. And for some reason, I think in personal development for me, I've found that when somebody changes, even if it's for the better, even if it's what they want, the people around them are used to them being a different way. And it almost feels like a threat or like a loss for the people in your life to feel you changing. And so I wonder, in people's careers, what changes they actually want to be making and where they're keeping themselves stuck to satisfy other people in their life versus pursuing that purpose. But one statistic I read, you were talking about, making money versus creating wealth. And I understand that no matter how much money people make right now, if you lost your job, no matter how much money you have, it's a totally different game from creating wealth. And so I know as somebody who teaches financial literacy, and you're such a multifaceted person, just having spoken to you before the Zoom, you know, like you're a family guy, you're a sports person, you have so many pieces to you, which I think most people do, whether they express it or not. What tips do you have for anybody right now to kind of start thinking about how to save more, how to be more financially responsible? Because just this morning I read that 16%, I wrote it down, 16% of Americans aged 18 to 26 are optimistic about their financial future. So 84% of this country is not, you know.
16. Oh, geez, that was opposite. Wow.
Yeah. So 16%. I know I don't have to sound like 60. Definitely not. 16%. And so I think most people right now are sitting here feeling like I'm not optimistic, and 54% of millennials don't feel confident they can pay off their student loans at all at any point. So I think that hopelessness is so huge. So for the note takers, what are some financial tips that you've got?
Yeah, wow, those numbers are definitely startling. And I think that's why, you know, I started teaching my own class and creating a Life 101 platform for everyone to kind of utilize. But it's like, how do you become more confident in your financial situation and makeup, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the biggest thing. It's not that you have to be as rich as Michael Jordan or Oprah, right? It's just, how can I make sure that I am confident? I know the decisions and the money that I'm spending and why I'm spending that money, because ultimately that helps get rid of some of that anxiety that comes with money decisions. And so to help with that, first and foremost, you have to do a financial audit, right? You need to audit yourself. And what that means is basically, let me look through all of my credit card statements. Let me look through all of my bills. Let me get to know myself financially, right? It's not that you can't trust other people to do it, but you know you the best. And so one of the things my wife and I do, we literally at the end of the year, we try to do it every 6 months so it stays a little fresher. But you know, at the end of the year, we literally print out all of our transactions, bank statements, credit cards, everything, and literally go through and kind of highlight things that we're kind of looking back on like, wow, that was kind of a little different, right? Like, but literally by going through everything, then you start to create a little game plan for yourself going forward of like, wow, I'm eating out a lot, or wow, man, I didn't know my gym membership cost me this much and I really only used it this amount of times per year. By doing it, you'll find money right there. But also by going through your bills, you'll catch people overcharging you. You'll catch all of those types of things as well. A refund you should have gotten that you didn't receive. But doing that first and foremost, then going through and calculating your monthly expenses. So the first thing is going through all of your stuff and just kind of seeing how you spend money, and then going through and calculating your monthly expenses in terms of every penny that leaves your house on a monthly basis. I think those are, and when I say monthly expenses, I say these are like those locked things that are constant. So your rent, your mortgage, your car note, your car insurance, your own insurance, your cell phone bill. Do you use Netflix, Hulu, every single penny that leaves your house on a monthly basis? Let's put it onto a spreadsheet. You can there's free tools online, Google Sheets and all of that type of stuff. Feel free to use something to put it on there so that now you know on a monthly basis, I spend X. There, now you can create a plan for yourself moving forward and give yourself metrics to challenge yourself. Hey, I can take a little bit of money away from here. Hey, I didn't even realize they were charging me this month. And you can kind of create I want to travel more. So what do I need to do to actually create me a little pool of money so that I can travel more, right? Doing those two steps will help you have everything out on the table, because a lot of people start to plan. A lot of people start to say, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, but they literally don't even know their status quo. They don't even know where they are at this point. So I would definitely challenge everyone to do that first and foremost, and then you'll be able to make a stronger plan moving forward because you'll know all your chess pieces at that point.
And, you know, as you were talking about this, Brandon, it's like, I think one factor in it is denial, which I think is so sneaky, because I mean, I remember when I gained the freshman 15 in college, I didn't want to acknowledge that certain clothes didn't fit me anymore.
Uh,
I just stopped wearing them. And then it was like 4 months later, it was like, what happened to everything? And I think that that's the way people can be with their finances, is intimidating.
yeah.
And so do you have
Like
any,
almost not to
yeah,
jump in like the doctor. Like sometimes you just don't
100%.
want to. I'd rather not know, right? And to make everyone feel okay, like I do go through this as well. Like I'm sure there
Yeah.
are people who I don't even want to say look like they have it all figured out and all of that type of stuff. Like we're still on our journeys too. There's certain times where I'm just like,
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't be spending this, but okay, let me do it, right? Like it's not a perfect science. However, I do have, and we all want to have, it's just a clear understanding of, okay, I can afford to make this boneheaded purchase that I know I'm making right now, right? Like, again, we all are on our own financial journeys, but, not knowing and not ever getting that status quo is how you end up, I was watching an interview yesterday, and how you end up setting yourself back 7 to 10 years
Wow.
financially because you just wanted to dig a hole for yourself and never knew. Don't lie to yourself. That's one of the things my granddad taught me. Never lie to yourself.
Yeah, and that's the easiest lie to tell. And it's interesting, I actually read a study that said that we tell ourselves, or we tell the world, an average of 11 lies per day. And I was talking to an author who wrote a book about lying, and there's 7 different types of lies she comes up with. And I don't recall all 7, but what I do know is one of the most sneaky ones is like the everyday lies. Like if you're on a work call and I say, how was your day? And deep down you just have to fight with your partner, and like if your house is a mess, and you're not doing so well, it's the easiest lie to say, oh, everything's good. How are you? It's like there's like this social norm of not being fully honest. And I get it, because people want to be professional and stuff like that. And so I'm curious, listening to you, about side hustles, because I know, and working from home. A lot of people are working from home right now. They want to be productive. I'm also thinking in the back of my mind about this 5-foot tall amethyst crystal I just bought, and my bonehead expenses of what you just were talking about. So I'm going to be doing an audit after this. It's shipping to my house this week, this huge crystal. I'm like, why did I need that? But I did.
But you got to treat yourself. You work hard, you got to enjoy it, but making sure that you're not going to make a decision today that's going to affect you a year from now. That you're like, man, I wanted to get a random, but I have I'm pointing at it. It's a 150-gallon fish tank.
Yeah, right? Why not?
I literally got it cleaned yesterday. We don't have dogs and stuff like that, so we have a fish tank. That's my pet. But those
yeah, that's the thing.
Tank person tells me, hey, I got this person that has a 180-gallon tank. And I just thought, we literally just upgraded to this maybe a few months ago from a 55-gallon. I'm like, oh, 180. And in my head, I'm like, not even telling Taylor, my wife, I'm like, I'm kind of thinking it through. I'm like, oh, I kind of need it. I'm measuring my stand. Will it fit? Fortunately, it doesn't fit. So it kind of makes sense for me to get it. And then in my head, I'm like, well, I can get it. And then whenever we move to our dream house, I'll have it. But I want a bigger tank. But it's a good deal, right? And I'm like literally going through it again. Hopefully I don't get it because the stand doesn't fit. So it literally would make no sense, but we all do it.
Yeah. Well, you're making me think a lot about, like, even for me as an author, I write a lot about money mindset and the stories, and I'm still in process. I think I parallel process with people, just like you're saying, like you're a work in progress always. But with money mindset, just really for anybody watching, kind of reflecting on, like, how did you grow up around money? What were the conversations like in your house? How do you treat money? Do you give yourself a big treat and then you want a bigger one? Do you save forever and then barely reward yourself and buy into this belief that one day you're going to have it all, but not today or not next year? So it's interesting to look at all of this, and kind of getting into work from home. I know that as somebody, you manage a real estate business, if not 2, I think.
Yeah.
2 real estate businesses. You've got your baby, your amazing wife. You've got, NFL, so many pieces here. How are you productive? Is there anything you're doing, or the way you see productivity at work from home, that we can offer everybody listening to kind of carry into their own routine?
Yeah. I think it's about creating a schedule and a routine, and extreme prioritization. So, once you, like, I know for me, like, I have a schedule of my side hustles or my hustles in general, right? Like, And clearly football is number one, right? So in the morning, first thing, there's nothing that can get in the way of my training, virtual meetings, all of that type of stuff, right? That is blocked off. And, every once in a while I might have to take a call or something in between working out. But, for the most part, I try to keep that sacred, right?
Yeah.
Because what people also have to take into account is like understanding when your primary fuels your side hustle, right? And
Yeah,
if that's
that's a
the
great
case,
point.
you have to make sure you take care of that primary, right?
Well, this is a good point because anybody listening, it's like it can be tempting to go into that mindset of I'm going to start a business. I just got laid off, and this is what I'm going to go all in on. And sometimes it's like the least ideal energy to be in when you need clients or customers is desperation. So it's like navigating that juggle is such a great tip because I think people get caught up in that.
Yeah, everything is. I mean, especially it's leverage,
Yeah.
right? Like when you have a primary, and even investing in general, one of the things Warren Buffett talks about is not being investing from a desperate place, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I've benefited on the real estate side by having a primary. I think real estate is an amazing quote unquote side hustle because I'm not forcing a deal, right? Like if it happens, cool. I have 2 house flips going right now that are over timeline because of this crisis and everything like that. But again, I have my primary that's still providing for me and all of that type of stuff, and it just helps you make clearer decisions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think scheduling is extremely important so that you're blocking out time to do it, but also giving yourself I think what helps me as well is giving myself a mini buffer, even if it's 5 minutes of just like, especially work from home, going upstairs, playing with my son, coming back down, 5-10 minutes. Sometimes that 5 minutes goes long, but like giving me a buffer before I switch gears.
Yeah.
What I used to fail at is trying to just handle it all at the same time. So I'm just bouncing between one real estate company, bouncing to consulting, bouncing to professor, and just kind of, handling it all, as opposed to thinking, okay, I'm a professor right now. Let's get this done for the next hour. Sometimes I literally set a timer on my phone and give myself X amount of time. That's actually been the most beneficial to me, is giving myself a certain amount of time and just going, because I work better under pressure. Sometimes, you have to extend it, but just give myself a certain amount of time. And this is the only thing I'm locked in on. I'm not answering calls. I'm not looking at anything else. Boom. Give myself a few minute break. Now I'm back and I'm managing my real estate company. What do we need to do? Who do I need to be on the phone with? And just kind of breaking it up like that, but also being able to make sure you compartmentalize enough to give 100% of yourself in that moment. Because, when you are spread thin, and I'm guilty of it, when you are spread thin, although we like to think, some of us like to think 80% of myself is as good as 100% of someone else to a certain extent, because that's how I've trained myself to be and tried to research and educate myself to be. Ultimately, 100% of myself is what it really takes to make sure that this does not fail and flop. So even in this hour, 2-hour span, I need to be 100% in, and not 60% in, 20% is thinking about, my workout this morning. Another 10% is thinking about I'm hungry. And then another 10% is watching ESPN in the background or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
You know what you're talking about, I think it comes back down to like self-care, because if something's going on personally, it can be really distracting to just focus, especially people who are going through heartbreak or financial stress. It's like, it's hard to kind of just get in front of your computer and fully invest yourself in focusing and creating. Do you have anything with self-care that you recommend for people who are at home, maybe going a little stir crazy?
Yeah. I mean, disclaimer, I am by no means a psychologist or anything like that. But I'm just speaking about what helps me. I think, one of the things I always tell myself is sometimes you have to be selfish to be selfless, right? And so for you to be a amazing husband, for me to be I'll talk in me, for me to be an amazing husband, for me to be the father that I want to be, for me to be the Christian I want to be, for me to be the son, the brother, etc. I have to be clicking on all cylinders, and I have to make sure that I'm taken care of, right? And unfortunately, a lot of us don't do that, right? So if you are going through something, it's not that it's, for example, my grandfather passed away last January, right? And so, for it's not that that's something that you're going to get over in a week or, a couple days and then, okay, now I've taken care of it and now I'm moving on for the rest of my life. No, it's something that's always going to be with you. But I needed to take the time, especially after, to deal with all those feelings, deal with all those emotions, block everything else out, right? And so a lot of us need to make sure, I guess my advice would be, make sure it's okay to take time to be selfish, to be alone, to do the things that you need to do to take care of any, not lingering feelings, but any emotions that you have, because ultimately to be the best version of yourself, you have to take care of that. A lot of us kind of let that stuff fester and keep trying to put on face, so to speak. And then that's when it lasts 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, etc. Again, it's not to say that your emotions won't get the best of you long beyond, this period or this self-care period, but you have to give yourself time and again, devote time to just enjoying and being yourself, right? Or taking care of yourself, right? Even if that is eating some ice cream and watching spending a whole day saying, listen, I'm playing, I'm not working. I'm just going to eat some ice cream and watch some Netflix. And that's what I'm going to do. Sometimes that's what you got to do, right?
Sometimes that looks like taking care of yourself.
Exactly. But once you get those days out, it's also about making sure you flip the switch and say, okay, I've given myself enough time. Now, let's go. We've dealt with this. Let's go. It's not that it can't affect me in the future, but it's game time now.
Yeah. I think that's a key point, because sometimes grief can be so big that people can sit in the grief, and kind of setting a deadline, like giving yourself permission. You also touched on something I think is interesting with self-care. Is sometimes I think, and you didn't do this at all, but I think a lot of articles I've read, sometimes it positions self-care actually as escapism. Like what you just said was, okay, sometimes self-care is this and it has a limit. Other people, I found self-care can be like, I'm going to take a bubble bath, eat a chocolate bar, do this, do that. And it's at a certain point, it's like self-care looks like what you were doing, saying take a financial audit and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. It can look like taking responsibility. It could look like reaching out to SoFi and consolidating a loan that is haunting you. If you're one of those 50%, 54% of millennials that think you can't pay off your student loans, SoFi. And so I think that these sorts of resources are also just there to take responsibility as part of self-care, which is great. And I know that you are obviously an expert at this point in getting clients or creating revenue for yourself outside of a job. And I know a lot of people who are going to take your productivity tips to heart, write them down. They might be thinking about getting started in a business. And I think every entrepreneur has like a different lens on what it looks like to get started or to position yourself in the market. What's your kind of sauce, or what's your thought on what it really takes to be a successful side hustle or entrepreneur?
Yeah, it is. I would say it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of work, but I won't say it in a way where, you get a lot of people who say that about their jobs and then, they're not kind of steering you away from it. I just think personally, I remember my first year with the real estate business where we started flipping homes, and I'm just like, I remember one day upstairs in my office and I'm just like, wow, like this is a lot. Like I'm literally been on the phone. I didn't plan for my entire day to be taken up with calls and contractors messing up and, companies overcharging me and all this type of stuff. And this is stressful. And I might have gotten to a bad deal, all of these different types of things. And I'm just like, well, listen, I mean, if I was at any other job, I'd be stressing too, right? I just, unfortunately, I own this, right? So I think that, anything that you do, whether you're working for someone else or doing it yourself, there's going to be stress. There's going to be hard times. Financially, are you able to weather a storm? Because unfortunately, that's what a lot of us go through. when you're initially starting out with your business, because most times I don't know if an official stat on this, but I would say 9 times out of 10, whatever way you're thinking it's going to go in your head, it's not going to go that way, right? Doesn't mean it's going to be complete failure, but whatever you envision, like, oh, I'm gonna go this, I'm gonna make this deal, I'm gonna get this client, and then I'm gonna have 100,000 users, and then blah blah blah. It's probably not going to go that way.
Yeah.
But what I typically do is, like, I'm actually thinking about a delivery company now. And so my process is making sure, first and foremost, kind of doing some light research myself, right? Making sure I'm kind of vetted the deal from my standpoint. So as I slept on it for weeks, months, whatever, how long you feel comfortable with it, I'm making sure that it even makes sense to even waste my time pursuing it, right? Because time is your most important asset, of course. Then once I am like, okay, this is what I want to do, I immediately go and find mentors, people who are already doing it and doing it well, right? People, especially because it's a side hustle, it's a side venture, business, etc. You want to limit the amount of mistakes. You want to limit your learning curve as much as possible, right? And so mentors help you with that. And so even if I have to add value to a mentor by giving them some of my time and helping them with their business, that is something that I will do, because it will save me in the long run, by not making a fatal mistake too soon. So vetting the business, for me, mentors, because they will also give you guidance as you start to plan your business, your infrastructure, what it looks like. Oh, you don't really need this person to do that. Oh, I have this person who does X, Y, and Z, right? They'll help fine tune your vision. And then at a certain point, I actually posted to my Instagram story today this video of Will Smith talking at BCope51. Got a shameless plug, right? But this video of Will Smith talking about, like, doing certain things and taking these risks are going to be lonely, right? So at a certain point, you're not going to feel good about it. You're still going to be anxious about it. But at a certain point, once you've vetted it and you've made the decision that this is what I'm going to go for, that's when you got to take the leap. And it, like he says in the video, it's going to be lonely. People are going to look at you like you're crazy. He was making jokes about people talking about him, like, man, you're not that funny. And then, other people start to like him. You're like, man, this kid is kind of funny, right? So it's just about making sure that at a certain point, you're going to have to rip the Band-Aid off and get going with that actual practical experience. And at that point, that's when you hope, those training wheels come off pretty easily, and you hope you just keep,
Yeah. It's, I love what you're saying. And you also kind of pointed out something that I think Tony Robbins reminded me of. And I don't know if you've heard this, Brandon, but he talks about how there's 3 types of people. You're a dabbler, a stressor, a master. And you basically know which one you are when you hit a plateau. Like the dabbler quits because he wasn't even that serious anyway. And then the stressor takes on and panics the whole way through and then gets the result. And then the master, he says, is the one who looks for a mentor and asks themselves, like, looks at the plateau and says, this is to be expected. This is human. And who's been here before? And who can I hire? Or who can I look at? Or success leaves clues. Who can I study to at least understand if you don't want to invest in a mentor? And that actually brings me to another point about mentorship. Like, I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize, like, you can hire a mentor. I think there's some intimidation of paying money for that kind of wisdom. What do you have multiple types of mentors in your life, or do you pay your mentors? Do you have one that you've taken with you since you were young? What kind of mentors, and how can somebody approach a mentor if it's a free mentor? Because I know that is a huge topic for a lot of people and very intimidating for some.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think for me, I think there's tools out there now that can help you get free mentorship, but there's also some that are just paid as well. I think like Masterclass and all of those types of things, right? But you have social media as a free mentorship guide, right? You have the internet, right? Which also can be looked at as a resource. I wouldn't necessarily say mentorship, so to speak. But for me, I always try to find mentors who are, like you said, you would look at as masters in the field. Now, as you find some of these mentors, you find out, well, you're not really that much of a master in the field, but even that helps you fine tune your own business and your game and what you're trying to do. So it's the best resource, the best sense of learning. I don't pay my mentors, right? Like I don't provide them with a, pay them a Venmo or whatever, right? I don't provide them with any fee. However, I do stress the importance of adding value to them and their business, whether it's in network, whether it's in resources, right? For me, that is the most, I think that is one of the best things that you can do for a mentor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't have the capital to say, oh, I'm gonna give you X amount of dollars for this piece of advice, you can put in the sweat equity to help them and push their business and their vision. And I think also most good mentors, because I actually asked a mentor of mine a question about that, like how do you balance helping as many people as possible with
sanity,
your own goals and visions,
yeah,
and what you're trying to do, right? And they said, most good mentors understand that, this will come around in the long run, whether it's with you specifically or just a karma thing. So most mentors want to help. And I think that's another big thing to touch on. A lot of people want to help.
Yeah.
Right. So I think more importantly, a lot of people want to help. So if you approach someone correctly, obviously, and there's levels, right? Like you're not trying to send LeBron James a LinkedIn message today, right? Like you probably need to make sure you're approaching the right person who has the time and capacity to talk to you, right? But if you're able to approach them correctly, showing, hey, like this is something I'm actually interested in, right? Like this is the work I've already put in. I would just really appreciate your guidance. Then that would help you tenfold, because there's a lot of people who reach out wanting guidance and they really want you to basically, they don't reach out to a mentor expecting them and wanting them to plan your business and run your whole business, right?
Yeah.
Don't reach out to a mentor saying, hey, I want to be a real estate, I want to flip some houses. What should I do? And just sit there and look at them blankly, right? Like I don't have the time to do all of that for you.
Yeah.
So I think that that's another important topic, is people generally want to help. That's how my foundation, Beyond the Basics, that's how we have done well, because there's a lot of people who want to volunteer at our events. They want to help. It's just about us putting together a package that makes sense. So people are like, oh yeah, I would love to help. Oh yeah, I would love to help, right? Like you have to put together a package, not a pitch presentation, but just your package needs to be right when you're approaching a mentor, so that they know that you're serious and
worth their time
and wasted.
Yeah, so true. And it's funny, I have a friend who owns a large company and he gets reached out to often, and he does little tests. And I think I do this even in my coaching practice, to decide if I'm going to take on a client. Sometimes I'll send them homework and decide if they're going to do the homework, then they're a good client, stuff like that. And I remember he told somebody, a mentee, he has I think it's like $1 billion company, and he told them, I can meet you for coffee at 6:30 a.m. at Starbucks. And the guy was like, oh, do you have anything later? Like, I'm not an early morning person. And that was like the end of it. So it's like really taking that person's time. And you kind of touched on something really cool that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to, which is this fine line between being visionary, like you were talking about Will Smith and having a vision, versus being delusional.
Yeah.
And this can be, because I think there's a delusion that you were kind of pointing out, of somebody being like, all right, I want to do my business, so can you just set it up? Like there's a delusion to thinking like something outside of you is going to be the solution for your thing, What practices or ideas do you have around coming up with a vision for people who are kind of sitting at home right now? Maybe their plan A fell through, and it's time for a plan B. Or maybe they want to have a vision for plan A again. I don't know. What insight can we give people listening about that?
Yeah, I think vision takes time and it takes fine tuning, right? And so typically with the things that come across my mind, a lot of people don't know that I'm very interested in film. I'm very interested and passionate about producing and directing films. Commercials, all of that type of stuff. ideas, movies, everything. So for me, I see everything, even from a business standpoint, in it looks like a movie in my head of how it's going to play out. Now, what I see today, if I think of this delivery company, what I see today might be a lot different next week. Might not be completely different, but I might have had time to kind of think on it, marinate on the idea, and now I'm pivoting almost before I've even started and think, oh, this would be a better way to do this, right? And so I think from a vision standpoint, giving yourself time. I can't tell you there's like a definite, timeline, 3 months or 2 months or 3 weeks, right? Like, but ultimately giving yourself time for that vision to be fine-tuned, and also starting as lean as possible, right? And that's another reason why you look for I typically enjoy having a little bit of time to fine tune a vision, is because a lot of times it helps you cut out unnecessary costs. It also gives you more time to, align with mentors and get other people's advice and input on certain things. But start as lean as you possibly can, because I think that's, a problem with a lot of the quote unquote side hustles, or dreams or companies in general, not even just small mom and pop shops. It's the problem with our economy, right? There's a lot of people who operate in debt, right? You're just literally throwing your credit card at the situation rather than making sure you actually have a sustainable, viable product. And then now something like this happens and you owe a lot of people money, right? Starting as lean as possible. And I think that when you fine tune your vision, it helps you, for me personally, maybe that's also because I'm frugal or cheap.
Well, there's a difference between being cheap and frugal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I guess for me, a lot of times when I give myself that time, it ends up becoming, how can I start this leaner?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually see we have some questions on deck. So anybody who is watching, feel free to post them. We're taking track of them. But I saw one and it said, how do you use years of financial experience? I'm just reading my notes over here, as well as mortgage, and put all your life work experience together to come up with a certain professional type of job. So somebody said, I experienced working for a lot of the big banks here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've been a licensed register rep within the industry. So basically, I think the question is really asking, like, how do you take all of those years of different experience in financial and mortgage and put it all into one type of business? I have some thoughts on it, but I'm curious what yours are, even more so.
Yeah, that's one hell of a question. Well, I think you have to figure out a problem, right? Like with all of those years and experience, right? If you're trying to, and I want to make sure I'm answering the question, I guess, if you're trying to create a business based off of all your years and experience and everything like that, I'm assuming based on all those years and experience, you're seeing something that is misaligned or something that's not happening that you could service and do better. Yeah. First and foremost, I would assume by you asking the question that you feel like you can do it better, right? You're not trying to let me recreate something that other people are already doing. But okay, we can do this better. Now, how do you use those years of experience to create that solution to that problem or those two problems, right? I think that would probably be, whether it's coaching people, right? Whether it's guiding people or being just like a financial resource for people. I came across a company recently who they literally consist of a bunch of financial advisors with all of them have over 10 plus years of experience, yet they've all given away their certifications so that they can literally be within this business and coach people up on money coaching, life decisions, all of that type of stuff. So now the people, their clients, don't feel pressure. They don't sell any products or anything like that. They're literally a resource for you, right? Maybe that might be something that they can use.
Well, you're touching on something really, because the question I'm really hearing her say is like, I've done many different things in one arena. How do I make sense of it in a business? That's what I'm gathering. And I think a lot of people feel that. But just a friendly reminder, you can have many different types of ideal clients, maybe not much more than 3 or 4 until your business could be more confusing. But, people are allowed to take that permission to be multifaceted, just like you and I both are.
Right.
And then also just solving a problem, I think that's huge. And sometimes people with business, they put their shingle in the ground and they're like, this is what I want to do. And it's like, does the market need it? So really good point.
Yeah.
We got another question about mentorship around how to find one. And I think this is always a really common and really interesting question. Do you have any thoughts on someone who's sitting at home right now thinking, I really would love that kind of bond. I really would love that kind of understanding or support. How do they get started in even approaching that?
Yeah, I would say, what I would typically say would be in our previous norm, but you still can get it done now, because I think there's a lot of people looking for ways to actually give during this time. And I would think first obviously you would know in your mind what industry you're interested in, right? Then in that industry, I'm sure you can find certain players or companies that are successful within that industry. Sure, you could also then find a directory or a contact list as well. And from there, it's literally almost like, the old school movies of just like cold call pitching type of thing. I wouldn't get on the phone and call. I would send the email at this point in time. But finding a group of people who you can literally damn near blind carbon copy. I wouldn't suggest blind carbon copy. Put their name in it, personalize it a bit, but just shooting off emails to people. What I would have said in the previous norm is trying to email people and then go and shadow them, go and have a cup of coffee with them. And then when you're having that cup of coffee or lunch, taking them out to lunch, whatever, then you're asking them, can you shadow? Can you come on a walkthrough with them, or can you, whatever they do, whatever that industry is, but trying to just immerse yourself into what they do and give yourself a foot in the door, right? Because once you're next to them, they're going to tell you their thoughts unfiltered about not only their role, but the industry in general. A lot of people will tell you, man, if I could do this all over again, I would do X. Yeah. And then that might make you think, well, maybe I should change my idea from Y and pivot a little bit towards X, right?
Yeah. So. And that, I love that you talk about that, because I think sometimes people see a pivot as backing up in their career, but it's like backing up is not backing down, sometimes you just have to course correct or calibrate. And so really good point. And then another question we got right here is around mentorship again. It's such a hot topic. What is your process of determining a mentor to help with your planning? I think this is a good point, because there's just so many people out there, like picking the right one for you. And I think the idea of the right one has so many different facets. It's not just what can they help you with, but who are they as a person? Because I've seen so many people hire people that, or find a free mentor that has the results they want, but not the soul, and integrity that they want. So what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's two parts, and I'll try to keep it as simple as possible, because you just touched on one. One is just, are they where you want to be or on track to where you're trying to get? Now, the caveat to that is, like, you also don't have to just have one mentor, right? There could just be other people who are not necessarily the top dog on the rung or on the ladder, but they're on that path. They work in that field. So, sometimes we think this mentor, when we hear mentor, we think of this old person who's, has 150 years of experience in the field, and they can tell you everything, and they just pour out wisdom. Like, your mentor doesn't have to look like Dumbledore or Gandalf, right? Like, you can also, like,
or Voldemort.
Exactly. It can be the person that's 2 years in at the field, in the industry that you want to get into, because guess what? They have more knowledge than you, right? They can be your quote unquote mentor. So sometimes thinking about it like that, who has experience where I'm trying to go or grow, first and foremost. And then the second most important thing is, like, can they deliver the message in a relatable, easy way? So We've all had conversations with people. This is why my class has been successful. I'll say this. And, you know, last year I probably wouldn't have said my class has been successful just because I didn't want to come off as I was bragging. But this year we've gotten a lot of feedback, and I'm just going to go ahead and claim it.
Yeah, why not?
Because I don't walk in there claiming to be an expert. I walk in there and I'm like, let's talk about these things. And ultimately, when we're talking about compounding interest, I'm telling you what it is and giving it to you in a digestible way that you can actually understand, unlike some of the other professors, or I won't say most of the professors, but some of the other professors that we've all had, or teachers we've all had, who literally they want to seem like what they're doing or talking about is rocket science. So they're just talking above your head for an hour and a half lecture, and then they're walking out of the room and all you've left with is, wow, this is hard. Yeah. I'm gonna need to go and learn this later from someone else, right? Yeah. And so the biggest thing, again, one, is your mentor in the path or on the path that you want to be on? But two, and most importantly, can they actually relay the information that you're trying to get to you in a digestible way, in your language? And it's not their fault if they can't, but if they can't, you probably want to find a mentor who tells you however you best get information delivered. It doesn't mean that they need to be putting up PowerPoints together for you and presenting to you. It's just more of like, you know, as one of my mentors said, before I dove into my first real estate project, one of my mentors, we were sitting down at dinner, he said, Cope, listen, this isn't rocket science. You buy a house for X, you put some money into it, you sell it for more. You buy another one for X, you put some money in it, you sell it for more, right? Like, again, we were having a different conversation, but he didn't have to say a bunch of big words and make himself feel like, oh, you know, this is tough, and, you know, you need to be careful, and using, you know, long 5-syllable words, right? Yeah, he broke it down in my language, and okay, now now I'm getting something from this mentorship, and now I can make sure that I don't, you know, step in any pitfalls.
Yeah. And, you know, you're also kind of giving a tip for the side hustlers or the entrepreneurs here, is like, speak to your customer in the language they understand, you know? So really good that even a mentor is able to do that with you. And I see another question that makes me think a lot about one topic we kind of brushed on, which was loneliness. You talked about, you know, like Will Smith saying success is lonely. And I remember reading Brene Brown was talking about how on paper we are the most socially alike and socioeconomically alike than we've ever been, meaning that we wake up and go to bed next to houses and people, and go to the grocery store next to people who look the same as us data-wise on paper. Maybe it's the same income or similar this or that. And yet we feel the most lonely we've ever felt as a society, which is so ironic that we are just surrounded by people who appear like us. Why don't we get along or feel connected? Why do we feel so disconnected? So I see a question here that talks about, how do you get over the social anxiety of reaching out to people? It might just be easy to say, just reach out. But many times people will overthink it and the outcomes with reaching out. I totally get this. I know you kind of touched on how to go about reaching out, like showing you did some groundwork, which is huge. Because I think the area where it doesn't get received well is when it feels like this person is just either victimized or asking something of you without having come with their power to the table. Right. So what, like, practical, grounded, like maybe cold emailing tips can we give people if they're just going to do a cold outreach that makes for a good message to somebody?
Yeah, I think even like going a little bit further back is like understanding, because I know the question was talking about the anxiety with reaching out. And one of the best pieces of advice I've ever got on that internship I was referring to in the past, or just best piece of advice I got in my life, was years from now, the person said, years from now, you'll be able to measure your success based on how many awkward conversations you were willing to sit through today or start today, right? And so I always think of that in my head. It's a no, right? Like, even when I'm reaching out, sending the email, it is a no in my head. So guess what? There's no harm in me reaching out and having them tell me no, right? Like, my ego might be hurt, I might be a bit bruised, but it's a no if I don't reach out. It's a 50% chance no if I do reach out. And ultimately, all of those things are out of my control, right? All I can control is my quote unquote pitch of why they should actually respond, so to speak. So I'd say most of the time when I'm reaching out, obviously when you can do in-person, contact, it makes it a lot easier, right? An in-person bumping, networking events, all of those types of things. The power of the mind, literally, I've gone to events with the sole purpose of bumping into people I already know will be there, and then making sure that we can exchange info and all of that type of stuff, and literally, have done that, and it's turned into great relationships now, right? Yeah. So I think like literally mentally pushing yourself to get over that anxiety. Again, I'm not trying to give you the just reach out answer, but understanding that anything you want to do, you're going to have to deal with that uncomfort or that awkwardness and put yourself out there and be vulnerable. I think that's the best way to say it. Like, you got to put yourself out there to be vulnerable. 100%. It's going to happen. Yeah. So sorry, I don't know if I.
No, you also kind of are touching on what's really important is our mindset, because what you're picking up on with this question is somebody saying social anxiety. And it's like, one of my favorite books to read to shift your mindset. It's a book called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. I don't know if you've heard her stuff. She's great. Awesome. But I think that's what you're offering, is questioning the mindset that you have something to be anxious about. And I know also that quote about uncomfortable conversations, but I think it's also taking it even deeper, managing your nervous system. Like your quality of life is determined by how well you can manage your nervous system. And for that person who asked that question, I guess I could offer you a mantra, which is high intention, low attachment. Yeah. How can you see those responses as a little present in your inbox? Because when I'm cold networking, I don't even think about the emails that have gone out. Like, once I hit send, it exits my brain, because carrying that of are they going to respond or not just puts the quality of your mindset and your life into an area that's like, for what? So really good tip. Just my final question for you is, and somebody asked also, can you name a few resources, books that you consistently check for information about real estate or finance? So is there anyone that's inspired you books wise?
Yeah, the first book I would suggest for anyone to read is called The Banker's Code. It's by George Anton. It's actually a free PDF online. So Financial Literacy 101 saves you money right there. You can literally Google it. I give it to my class. But that, for me, I used to want to become the bank, and it has helped me literally change the way I think about money in general. I think about banking and the velocity of a dollar. So from a financial standpoint, I consider that the foundation. It's actually one of the things that I do that you said, like, your buddy makes, if they want.
Oh, like a little test?
If someone wants to be their mentee, I make sure I send them these books and they have to read it, type of thing. For real estate, specifically The Reality of Real Estate Investing, I cannot remember who it's by, but it basically has like 20 different actual real estate examples, like real estate investment examples from the author of different ways to make money, pitfalls, all of those types of things. And then finally, a book called Long Distance Real Estate Investing. And that one helps me, or I've read that one particularly because obviously I play football in season, and as I started transitioning from team to team and leaving operation in a city, I wanted to try to prepare myself to train my team or the people around me to be able to handle it with me not being there on a day-to-day basis, type of thing. So Banker's Code, Reality of Real Estate Investing, and Long Distance Real Estate Investing.
I'm writing these down for myself, so this is great. And my final question for everybody listening for you is just like, and I know that I could be putting you on the spot, but you're pretty good at that anyway, is what's your best advice you've ever gotten for your career or your life, or what do you live by? Pretty much same question, but I'm curious.
Awesome. It was funny. If I wouldn't have been able to answer the question, I would have acted like the Wi-Fi started breaking up. Is
that what happened last time we talked? I'm just kidding.
No, the best piece of advice, that is a powerful question. But I would tell people, I don't have I have a lot of different advice that's been great. My favorite quote is, and it's so long I can't even say it, but it's a Phil Jackson quote. It's kind of the way I live life, right?
Mhm.
It's not a Phil Jackson quote, it's a Buddhist quote, I believe, but it's in his book, The Sacred Hoops. But if you can look up, the glass is already broken. So basically, they talk about, I look at this glass, I love this glass, I admire it, it holds my water nicely. It's on the edge of a counter. It's so beautiful. The sun reflects in it beautifully. When someone walks past the glass and their elbow brushes it off the table, it breaks and shatters. I say, of course. When I know that the glass is already broken, every moment with it is precious, right?
Mhm.
So when I look at every single thing that I'm doing, football, real estate, family, the only guarantee is that this thing ends at some point in time. Clearly, I know that comes off kind of morbid from a family standpoint, but you get what I'm saying. Stay with me, right?
You actually pretty much memorized the quote. I just Googled it and I was going to kind of like come in and swoop in, and you just crushed it. And I guess for anybody else who's feeling the wisdom today, this was so awesome, Brandon. I guess my quote I live by is act as if or the universe is rigged in your favor.
Oh, I love that.
By Rumi. So I always just look at everything that's happening and figure out how it's rigged in my favor. So thanks so much. This was awesome. You're awesome. I'm so grateful everybody at SoFi and everybody on LinkedIn who's following gets to tune into you and just really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And please stay safe. Continue to stay safe.
Thank you. You too.